At USPG, we always seek to have conversations that are global in character. And so I'm delighted and deeply honoured that for today's webinar, we're able to welcome three outstanding speakers and indeed friends. The Right Reverend Dalcy Dlamini, who is the Bishop of Eswatini, and Mr. Kevin Farmer, the Executive Secretary of the Codrington Trust, an archaeologist and co-lead on an innovative joint programme with USPG on reparative justice for plantation chattel slavery in Barbados. And I hope also that we will be welcoming the Most Reverend Dr. Miembo Ndola, who is the Archbishop of Tanzania. He's not yet on the call, but I anticipate and hope that he will be in a few moments' time. Bishop Dalcy in Eswatini is experiencing some bad weather storm-wise, so that may affect her connection, just to let you know. And Kevin Farmer has just returned from Jamaica, and I'm sure you would all like to join me in expressing our thoughts and prayers for sisters and brothers in Jamaica and across the Caribbean at this time. Thank you. Let me now hand over to Catherine.
Thank you very much, Duncan. It's good to be here. And once again, a very warm welcome, everyone, wherever you are joining us from. Now, we are here on this exciting day as we hear stories from across the globe on erasing, on removing the eraser. And I've just been reflecting and I say to myself, removing the eraser. I wonder if the Gen Z will actually agree with us that we need to remove the eraser, or actually we need to release the backspace button because they're so used to use their keyboards, right? So I think in this space, we're going to not just remove the eraser, but also to just challenge one another on how we can remove and release our fingers from the backspace button. Now, when I was growing up, I remember going to school and I did history, and our curriculum covered two aspects of history: African history as well as European history. And I was surprised when I moved to the UK to realize that my contemporaries didn't really learn African history in the way that I had also learned European history. So in this conversation, it's just for us to widen our perspective, because there is a danger in a single story that is told from one perspective. So we may know what we know about Africa. We may know what we know about Black people in the Caribbean. We may know what we know about Black people across the world. And it's okay. We're not saying what you have read in the newspapers is wrong, but we are here to be given another perspective that will also help us to edify what we know. So without wasting so much time, I'm just going to invite here Bishop Dalcy and Kevin to help me and share a little bit, reflecting on your own context, and especially wearing the lenses of racism and imperialism, colonialism. How have the identities and legacies of Black individuals in your region been erased or overlooked?
Okay, maybe I should begin, Catherine. Thank you so much for inviting us to be part of the webinar. We don't take it for granted. It's a mammoth task, removing the eraser. And thank you so much for beginning from the history that we have learned, because most of us, we learned about Jan van Riebeeck and many others. However, we are not there today. I will try and answer the question in three folds. Racism, imperialism, or colonialism, what we can simply say, had a great impact in the continent of Africa. It has stripped the people of their identity. What do I mean of that? Stripping their identity because of the skin color. If you were not white, you find that you were not given privileges that other white people were getting at that time and are still getting even now. But I think the critical issue when it comes to the skin color is the issue of tribalism. You find that those who are white and privileged, they are thriving on tribalism because some of the nationalities that we have in Africa have got many tribes. And what does that mean? It means it's easier to do the divide and rule because it's like we have different dialects, different languages, different what. So instead of focusing on the main issue, it then helps the other party to thrive on that. Then it's easier to say Black people are not, they are not united, they are not, a lot of things are being said, yet it is because of the pigmentation. Secondly, Black people were stripped of their masculinity. What do I mean? I'm talking as a female now. You find that as a female, you are expected to think in the lenses of the other gender or the other gender or the other tribe. And when you come and try and bring yourself into the matter and allowing yourself to think as a female and to continue leading or doing things as God has given you the grace and the faith to do it, you find that it becomes a problem. The other thing that has come with racism and colonialism is the issue of power dynamics. In Africa, the struggle that is there is patriarchy. And because of patriarchy, you find that a certain group and a certain race is given privileges. So when you come as another race or as a female, you find that then the issues that people are thinking, you cannot think on your own, you cannot take tough decisions on your own. I'm a bishop right now, but there are people who still think I have to touch base with them in every decision that has to be taken. So the last thing for now, it's the economic scramble. Obvious when when colonialism came, it came with a big pack of economy, development, and everything that stripped our people not only of the minerals, not only of the value that we had on our culture, raising our animals and everything. And the saddest part is the fact that when racism came and colonialism came, it stripped families apart because men had to move now to the mines and children had to remain with the women, the same women that are not believed to have a leading role because of patriarchy. So those are some of the highlights that I can bring from the beginning, that it had an impact in the African continent and it is still impacting us. Sadly, it's the same thing that is happening even in church. There's still the divisions because of skin color, because of the masculinity, the power dynamics, and the money. Oh, by the way, those who have money, sometimes they feel they have to be in control. Thank you for now.
Thank you very much, Bishop Dalcy, for sharing that. I think as you were speaking, I was just even reminding myself the scramble for Africa. You know, everyone racing and trying to divide and all sorts of things. And definitely there are still visible signs, visible places that are attached to the hurts and some of the legacies that you have highlighted. Now I'm going to invite Kevin to share with us. So you are working on a project in Barbados, and speaking of that region, what can you say to this question?
I'm going to say to the question, wow, there's so much to say. I'll encapsulate it hopefully in less than 3 minutes. When we speak about imperialism and racism, they're synonymous when you look at the Caribbean. We must understand that this is a region whose history has been interrupted, disrupted, and changed forever because of the project of imperialism. I want it, when you look at this region, and you look at the Americas, and I'm dealing with North, South, Central, and the Caribbean, we're looking at a space in which the imperial project upended, disrupted, disseminated thousands, if not millions of people across an entire hemisphere and radically changed them forever. When we talk about the Caribbean, we are specifically dealing with a region where the indigenous population was decimated by imperialism, first by the Spanish and the Portuguese, then English and Dutch as colonial powers, and that the introduction of mono-agriculture was concomitant with the introduction of enslaved African chattel slavery. And as such, the region is the space in which ideas around oppression, along racial lines, the creation of laws to ensure the oppression and repression of a people were in fact first determined and created. My island, unfortunately, has the dubious distinction of being the space in which the first set of enslaved laws were created as early as the 1650s. We actually have physical evidence dating back to the 1660s. And this enslaved code is then taken from Barbados and to other islands in the Caribbean and to what we now call mainland North America, and enacted as a way of ensuring the continued oppression in perpetuity of persons of African descent. So even the question makes it seem as though we're looking back because our present is somehow radically different from what shaped us. And sadly, it is not. It is a continuum. And as a continuum, it must be continuously interrogated and safeguarded against, because we still exist in a space which was created through an imperial power, but along racialized lines. And so every day is really an attempt at a deconstruction of that decolonial space. And I think using lens sometimes can make it almost seem nostalgic. There's no nostalgia here. It is about the present day. And especially when we look at the world in which we now occupy, there seems to be a concerted attempt to take us back to the 18th and 19th century, which I find quite interesting. And in some instances, that's because people either are erasing their notion of history or indulging in an erasure of a concept of history. So I even find the topic today to be a quite interesting one. I love English language. It's a wonderful play on words. But what we must recognize is that we exist in a space that was created at a point in time whose effects, whose systems still are with us. Whether it is the language we speak or the food that we eat or the ways in which we transact business have their roots in the creation of that colonial trade system started almost 500 years ago, that we are still, because of history, beginning to come to grips with. But it also why there's such a massive pushback from some quarters as to the wish to deny this history, because to acknowledge it, one will then have to reconcile one's present with a past that is really not that past, but a past that is very much alive and living with us. And in that past, we must not forget the over 15 million people who were kidnapped and transshipped to this region, and the countless millions who died on the Middle Passage, and the countless more that we will never know who died on the marches inland to the coast in order to be trafficked and transshipped across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. And that is something that we're still coming to grips with and trying to understand through our various disciplines, whether it is history or archaeology or theology. I sit in that very unique space where religion was used as a tool of imperialism. And when you look at Codrington College, one must remember that its seminarians as priests were created for the North American, I was going to say market or theater, in the 17th and 18th century. And then in the 19th century, those who were freed, formerly enslaved, descendants of enslaved people, are then sent to West Africa to spread the word of the church. So what geographically is a small space becomes quite pivotal in understanding how the spread of the Anglican Church on both sides of the Atlantic took place, and took place at a time when the agenda was about entrenching an imperial agenda. And we're still living that today. So I'll end there because there are a lot more questions, and I'm looking forward to hearing comments and questions from the audience online today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you have said a lot, and some of it, you have really brought home the reality that we may just think of this as history, but actually it's not a thing of the past. It's actually something that we are living. And I think I could hear as well the echoes of what Bishop Dalcy was saying, the divide and rule, that it may probably be the motivation that is different or how it is playing out now, but it still seems like there is still a little bit of that happening. And because you've mentioned that, you know what, it's not just something about history, but we are living that history. I was going to ask us maybe to think just historically about the challenges and the obstacles that Black people and Black individuals have faced. But I think I'm now going to say, you know what, it's not just a thing of the past, but it is what is currently happening. So what exactly are the obstacles or maybe the challenges that Black individuals are still facing today. They may still probably be the same as yesteryears, but they are maybe still as well the same. So what are the challenges and obstacles that Black individuals are facing today? If you'd like to start, then I'll move to Bishop Dalcy afterwards.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for that. All right, let's set the context. We're now entering the second decade of acknowledging persons of African descent and the diaspora. The first decade, which was created after Durban, was really about looking at systemic racism as it was then practiced in the world and seeking to find solutions around how to tackle a centuries-old problem. The recognition is that at the end of 10 years, even though one had identified some of those issues that led to the creation of the decade, the solutions had not quite had the impact which was envisioned, because at the beginning, no one quite understood how entrenched the issues around systemic racism were. And as such, we enter a second decade. And we enter the second decade in a changing world. And sadly, a changing world that is seeking to regress to a racialized past, because it doesn't necessarily want to confront and acknowledge that past. And everything from access to aid, access to loans, access to healthcare, that we would have seen happen during the pandemic, it is still skewed. And skewed is a nice word, but when we look at how it is skewed, it seems to be skewed very much along a racialized trajectory. When we look at the fact that we all go to international bodies for loans and aid, it seems to be there's greater interest and penalties placed on those of us in the global South than those of us in the global North. And to use the word Black, let me use it here as an all-defining term, as that which is non-white. In understanding how systemic and almost endemic the issues are that we're trying to discuss in a short time frame this morning. When we look at the Caribbean, the independence movement started in the 1960s, following India in 1948, and then Ghana. But there's still islands in the Caribbean that are colonies of the United Kingdom, that are colonies of the Dutch, that are colonies of the French. The Danes sold theirs to the United States, and they're still colonies. So we are still living in an area in which all of the people who inhabit it are not free. Some of them are still colonial subjects, and depending on what happens, are denied the citizenship of their home territories if something untoward or catastrophic happens to them. So we're still living in that reality. And as such, we need to confront it, and we need to confront it with truth. There's no such thing as misinformation. There's such a thing as a lie. And we simply need to call it out for what it is. There's no alternative reality. There's the truth and there's a lie. And those who wish to ensconce themselves in a lie are simply acknowledging a system which is inherently biased and privileges a particular set of people over others. And we must thank them for the acknowledgement, but still call it out, because that is the world and the space in which we continue to inhabit. I think what we have now is a better set of information in which to confront that reality and present and contemporary reality that sits upon a foundation of inequality, imperialism, and racialism.
Wow. Thank you so very much. I think the challenge is to call out the truth. But if you stand for the truth, you only stand alone. I can hear Lucky Dube singing and even saying, liar, liar, your pants are on fire. Because there is something here that, you know what? There is a challenge. So Bishop Dalcy, what can you say to this question?
Thank you so much. I will bring the African context, and I want to say to people, the greatest challenge in Africa has been mental slavery. Mental slavery, in a sense that many people have embraced poverty mentality, because the way Christianity was introduced, it was like when you are poor, you are closer to God. I don't know where the theology came from, but that mentality has destroyed African people, because they were meant to believe that you are closer to God if you are poor. That is why some of the hymns that were sung, even in churches, were depicting that if you are poor, either materially or whatsoever poor, you are closer to God. So that's the greatest challenge, because now when you try to change people's mindset, it is more of the handout mentality because of that. The other thing that came as a challenge in Africa is the internal oppression. People were oppressed internally because they were meant to believe that some of the things that were happening to them were supposed to happen because they came in a tray of the church, of faith. And then people believed that if it is coming from God, the Supreme One, it means it is the thing. Yet people were exploiting African people one way or the other. The other challenge is that most of our cultures were lost because culture was demonized. It was like anything that is cultural is wrong. Yet there is beauty and there is greatness in many of our cultural things. For example, in Africa, we talk Ubuntu, the concept that says, I am because you are. In Africa, we are saying a child is not raised, a child is raised by the community, yet the other part brought individualism that is slowly removing the beauty of culture. Culture was instilling self-control, values that were keeping our community intact. But because when colonialism came, the word culture was then demonized, and people were like, throw the baby with the water. Now, slowly but surely, we are trying to say to God's people, there's beauty in culture. There's a lot that you can learn from culture, from the culture of the African people. But because, again, it has been internalized to a lot of people, it is still a struggle that we are grappling with. Then there's also the issue of the community, that because the cultural community was saying there's a setup for men, there's a setup for boys, and a setup for girls, where we were told about life skills. But because now there was a new culture that was emerging, it meant that it's easier to adopt to a new culture than what you have, because what we had before has been called barbaric. The other challenge, now I will speak again as somebody in Eswatini. It's so funny that some of the laws that are still guiding us as a country are Dutch Roman law. When they talk about those laws, they quote 1600, 1700, but they still influence us. And we proudly say it is the Dutch Roman law, to show that it is still in our mentality that we cannot have our own. Then lastly, it is the issue of the institution of marriage. Our parents, our forefathers, as Kevin was saying, they were removed because some had to go to mines, some had to be shipped away, some had to, a lot was happening, and the family structure was destroyed. Then the last thing is the issue of race that I've spoken about before. But I want to bring now the concept of, if you are a woman or you are a person of color, the wages that you received, no matter how educated you are or no matter how qualified you are, but the pigmentation said the wages have to be low. And even promotions at work, those who are working, the treatment that you get in society, and obvious, if you go to our neighboring countries, because I'm closer to South Africa, our people were given Bantu education, the form of education that said you are not moving from anything, you are not developing. And the same time, those of us who received the white-collar job education, we were removed from some of the things, the skills that were in our culture was equipping us with, so that you just focus on that. You become somebody who is employed than being somebody who can equip yourself or employ yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bishop Dalcy and Kevin. And I think we may have spoken as if these are things of the past, but these are the challenges that are present in today's context as you were speaking. So I wonder, now trying to look ahead, what opportunities are there in confronting and reversing this erasure? What steps do you think will be most effective for just even small changes to start to happen? So Kevin, what do you think? What opportunities and steps do you think are effective in confronting and reversing this erasure?
I think forums like this, I think where we get together, and to use the American term, we speak truth to power, is the beginning. Where those of us who exist in that South-South world actually come together in forums like this and have those discussions, and then begin to implement elements of soft power. When's the last time anyone from Eswatini has been to Barbados? When's the last time anyone from Barbados has been to Ghana? When is the last time anyone from Ghana has been to Barbados? When is the last time that the diasporic communities in the UK who might go to the same church or go to neighboring churches in the same borough or district have actually gotten together to literally break bread and share food and have discussions and dialogue, and recognize that part of the imperial agenda of divide and rule is us not knowing anything about ourselves. How do we then implement small projects of interest, education, health, economic diversity amongst our communities and amongst our nation states, so that we drive that wedge into what has already been created for us to say, no, we don't agree with that. And I think that is some of the small concrete ways in which we begin to look ahead. And
Thank you.
And it might seem really odd, given what is happening now around the world, this is a time for us to have those discussions.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I'm sure there are questions that you will continue to speak into. And so I invite our audience, if you have got any questions, please do put them. You just need to go to the 3 dots, then go to the Q&A and put a question there. And Bishop Dalcy, what do you say?
Thank you so much. I think I would also allude to the fact that it is forums like this that could be the beginning of everything, because I'm sure if we can trace, Kevin is my brother, one way or the other. So it is forums like this whereby we are going to sit down and tell our stories. We have stories from Africa, stories from everywhere where our Black communities are. We need to get forums. We tell our stories. We share the pain. We look for a way forward. We celebrate each other. We cry together. More than anything, we do what we can do best, which is music and dancing, because that is our strength as African people. And when we try and express our emotions as African people, most people feel like, no, he is too much or she's too much. Come on, I won't stop dancing, I won't stop singing, because that is who I am. And it is forums like this that is going to give us the opportunity. African people used to have what we call an indaba. Other countries, they call it a palava. Other people will sit under the tree and they will tell stories. That is why as Africans, we are rich in oral tradition. That when our counterparts came, they said oral tradition doesn't have a backing, yet it has moved from generation to generation, the oral tradition. That has what has kept us as Africans, and we need to be proud. I want to know the culture of my brother Kevin, and I'm sure he wants to know my culture, because there's a lot in common. Thank you.
Wow.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. I think there is so much there that we can reflect on, but just the opportunity to be in this space is the beginning of something bigger. And so I'm excited that we are here. And I'm excited not because we are here, but because of how we are empowered to then go out and spread the good news and challenge and reverse the erasure. Now, I know there are a number of questions that are there, and I'm going to start us off with our questions. And this is an opportune time to speak not just probably to the church, but also, I think, to the outside world. There are so many elections happening in African countries. Some of these things that we have identified, I think, is not just a message for those who are in church, but also a message that those who are in church can also take out to the politicians and shape how things are done. But maybe before we even get to talk to the politicians, our people need to know how to respond. So the first question that we have here is, how can the practice of ministry in parishes help to untangle internalized colonial influences? How can the practice of ministry in parishes help to untangle internalized colonial influences?
As the non-priest, if I may, honesty. We need to be honest in acknowledging how the church came to be in the space in which it is, and how the church's theology and rhetoric at a particular point in time entrenched particular colonial influences. And in understanding that, then go about how we're going to reverse it for the various identities that make up your parish congregation. Because the Anglican Church not only trafficked in and held plantations in the Caribbean, but some of its bishops were owners of enslaved. And the message which the church gave in the Caribbean in the 17th and 18th century was as part of the system of colonization. Bishop Dalcy, and I think you was as well, Cathrine, spoke to songs you used to sing. The one that comes to mind is all men wise and wonderful, poor man at his gate, rich man in his castle, and both should know their estate. We no longer sing that, but realize what that particular stanza was saying, that once born, whatever you were born into, you had to live with the lot of what that is. Don't challenge it, accept it. And that is a form of oppression. That's a form of both mental and physical oppression. So I think being honest about why we're there, how we came about, acknowledging the sins of the past, and then seeking to, with your congregation, set about how can we deconstruct and move away from that becomes important, because that then leads us to have a meaningful and wholesome discussion around reparative justice, and not reparations in the doling out of money, but reparations as a way of deconstructing systematic racism and its institutions in order to create something that is better and that is wholesome and that is sustainable. Because when we talk about reparative justice, we're not speaking about 10 or 20 years. We're trying to deconstruct a system that has existed for the last 500. So we need to start putting in place what the repair around that system is going to be for the next 500. And I think that's where we begin. But it must be rooted in honesty and be rooted in the fact that it's going to be uncomfortable conversations, but ones that we need to have, especially when we acknowledge that the trauma of that past has been passed down to us epigenetically. And in understanding that, understand how entrenched this is and how much we have to do to reverse on the one hand, repair and reconcile on the other. But it starts with honesty, and it starts with those difficult conversations.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And those two are sometimes difficult to embody because we may want to be liked by everyone. We may want everyone to applaud us. So how can I be honest and challenge my bishop if he's not doing the right thing or if she's not doing the right thing? Bishop Dalcy, if I come and challenge you, would you take it from me? I don't know. What have you got to say, Bishop?
No, thank you so much. Thank you, Kevin. I can tell we've got a lot in common. Typical Africans. Anyway, two things that I want to comment about. Kevin brought the entry of somebody who doesn't stand on a pulpit. But as somebody standing in the pulpit, I will say, hello?
Yes, yeah, I can hear you.
As somebody who stands, thank you. As somebody who stands in the pulpit, I will say, we need to be intentional with the type of sermons that we bring. We also have to adopt contextual Bible study, because in contextual Bible study, that is where we are able to dig and speak the truth that other people don't want to hear when it comes to the Bible and the theology. So then the last thing that I will say, because we are a global family in this forum, let us be willing to learn from each other. You may have money or other advantages, but know that I may not have what you have, but I have values. I have other things that I can share. So again, it is the concept of bringing together our strengths so that we are able to work together. We have to run away from the fact that Africa is where we have got pure people who are always expecting to receive. We have things that we can give. It may not be in monetary form, but guess what? There are a lot of things that you can give, and they can shape the continent and the whole world and the community at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Dalcy. And I think that continues the work of decolonizing, but probably not just decolonizing our curriculums, but also decolonizing even our mentality, our mindsets, decolonizing our healthcares, how we teach about healing, that sometimes it's some of those small things that we teach ministries, how to do mission, how to do healing ministry. But have we also decolonized even the healing ministry that we are talking about? Or it's still something that is shaped by those Western influences or other influences? I don't know. So the challenge is for us all to learn from one another and to do the work that needs to be done. I have a question here again, which is linked, I think, with the reparations, the project happening in Codrington. So Kevin, probably you may speak into this.
No problem. What I can say very broadly is the Codrington Reparative Justice Project, in collaboration with USPG, it is the first one of its kind in the Anglican Communion. Yes, there's a project being done around reparations in the Episcopal Church, but slightly different. In the case of Codrington College, it is first the apology given by USPG that after being bequeathed the estate in 1710, it actively participated in enslavement by managing a plantation, but it also actively participated in the slave trade because Codrington had slave ships, and their letters in Lambeth Palace that speak to actions being taken and instructions being given. But then how do we sit with community or communities in bringing together a reparative justice project that seeks to address or to begins to seek to address that past. Because the monies which were given were simply not enough, but it is the beginning. And it is the beginning of repair and reconciliation in dialogue. So the project pillars, for those who want to go online, Codrington project, renewal and reconciliation. The project pillars were those which came out of a social impact assessment done with the communities who live on the estate.
But whilst we are on that,
Yes.
I wonder if you can also help those who are seeking to know, how can we speak well about reparations to the church communities, especially in the UK, because the idea is new. They don't see maybe the need to do that. Why should we give money out there when we have our own challenges? So how can we speak well to those?
Well, if it is that we are all Christian and we believe in salvation and we believe in faith and we believe in repair, it can't just be about the contemporary. We must in fact look at the disruption that we as a church have been involved in directly over time and seek to make repair around that. And again, recognize that by calling the trope of history and trying to hide it on the history is doing a great disservice, because many of the congregants to whom you are ministering are in fact descendants of the enslaved. In 2015, Her Majesty's Treasury announced boldly in a tweet, "We finally paid off the £20 million compensation to the slave owners in 1838. Wait a minute. Well, if you paid it off in 2015, it means that you were actively engaged in reparations. And in fact, the descendants of some of the enslaved who themselves are first and second generation persons in the UK have actually paid their former owners for their freedom. There must be something wrong with that logically. So if that is the case, and you've paid reparations to the person who owned you, what happens to reparations to the people who were owned? Given that you finally paid it off in 2015 for something that happened in 1834, surely one should logically then ask the question, how do we deal with the millions of people who were freed technically or legally, but were not given reparations for their enslavement and for their kidnapping and for their trauma? So it is called balance. It is called fairness. And if we understand it from that historical and contemporary lens, maybe we will not conveniently say, oh, it's in the past, let's not talk about it. Because then we can make the argument that the case brought by the Mau Mau against the Crown, which they won, was historically in the past, but it was recognized that what was done was both illegal and morally wrong. Then the continuum of that is chattel slavery, which ended in 1838, but to which changes really and truly did not materially or have never materially come about. And as such, we must seek to repair and redress that, and not to hide behind the trope of it's in the past. Because what, the past is present?
Yes.
There's a wonderful poem, the past is a foreign country, we do it differently here.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Kevin. And I think you have given us a lot that I hope will be helpful to the person who asked this question, but also for everyone who is here in engaging in conversations. There was a question about maybe how can white people be encouraged to do the work about privilege and history, and who should lead? I think everyone should lead. It doesn't matter. I think everyone who's been here is now empowered to go out and lead. Now, this is not just to say, you know what, I'm saying this ignorantly. It is difficult. And I think sometimes it places us in those places that are uncomfortable. But I think speaking truth to power doesn't just mean speaking to those higher powers. It can also mean the hidden powers, the relational powers around us. So I think we all have a role to play, and we can all do the little bits that we can in the simple and small ways that we can where we are. And I think that would make a change. And so thank you all very much for being here this afternoon. I'm sure this is just a conversation starter for those who may be interested in doing Bible studies to help them explore what they can do. There are good resources from USPG. Do also have a look at that. I think they will help you in answering some of the questions that you may have, but also empowering you to do what you need to do. So now I'm going to hand over to Lisa, who is going to close for us. Kevin and Bishop Dalcy, thank you all very much for what you have shared. Lisa, over to you.
Thank you for
so
having us
much.
this morning.
Thank you so much, Catherine, Kevin, and Bishop. It's been a real honor. And yeah, can we just take a moment, maybe just to say thank you, to celebrate the great work of these people and the work that they're doing and all that they've shared with us this afternoon. I know that, I can see it in the comments that people have been encouraged and challenged, and I can see from your questions that there's lots stirring. And I want to emphasize as we bring this to a close that this is just the beginning of a conversation. This isn't the fullness of it, and not the entirety of it, but there is opportunity for us to think about how do we keep this conversation going and bring others in to join us so that we can collectively do that work together in remembering the stories, remembering the lives, and actively changing the systems today. And so, Catherine, you've been a fantastic host. Thank you. It's great to see you again. And we want to, just celebrate the great work that you're doing as well in the diocese and the wider Anglican communion. We hope that you've enjoyed this webinar. It's recorded, so please do make sure that you go back, watch over, share it with friends, and encourage ourselves to continue this journey together. And yeah, I just want to say a quick blessing as we close. God Almighty, thank you for the beauty of the diversity in which you have made each of us. We thank you that even in your kingdom, in your world, things that are erased by empire in our world aren't erased in yours, that you remember the lives, the stories, the presence of each and every single person. And we pray that as we go on this journey, give us that grace to do the work of uncovering, of pressing that undo button and seeing what was there, seeing what was present, that we might learn from it, we might celebrate what was good, and we might learn to not repeat again what was harmful and what was broken. We commit ourselves into your hands and pray that you go ahead of us as we go forward. In your name we pray. Amen.